Volmink is to appear before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. And former apartheid police officer Jean Rodriguez to find out if his application for a permanent stay of prosecution has been successful. Folks, voting is done and dusted. South Africa has decided today. It's results day, and a very good morning to you, South African, those watching around the world. I'm Blaine Herman in Johannesburg. 26.7 million eligible voters, more than 22,000 polling stations, a massive task, you would agree. But it seems about 189,000 IEC officials have pulled it off. Over the last couple of months, political parties have crisscrossed the length and breadth of this country on their campaign trails. And today, they are learning whether or not they did enough. Was the message clear? Did parties do enough to energize their traditional constituencies to vote for them? Did their manifesto speak directly to the wants and needs of the people? We have been following every twist and turn of elections 2019, and soon the parties will find out if they attracted enough of the majority votes in the elections 2019. Somebody who's keeping a very close eye on the numbers as they roll in. In some areas they trickling in, and others they coming in thick and fast. It's our Desiree Chauke is live for us at the National Results Operations Center. As you can see the numbers there. Desiree, a very good morning to you.
A very good morning to yourself, Blaine. Good morning to our viewers. Thank you so much for making the time to join us this morning. As you can see, they say the writing is on the wall. We're chasing a developing story. In fact, throughout the show, we'll be having developments from different parts of the country. And on the show, we'll be joined by Professor Lisiba Tefu, who will be giving us an ability to speak to the numbers that will be brought by Professor Provincial, who is from the CSIR. This is the agenda. My name is Desiree Chauke. Welcome once again. We're coming to you from the Tshwane National Results Operations Center, where 26.22% of the votes have been counted. And as we try to bring you progress in terms of the numbers that have come out of different parts of the country, we'll be having a conversation here in studio to make sense of them. Earliest indications, the ANC well ahead, followed by the DA and the EFF actually sticking according to the script in terms of the pre-election polling that was coming through. But the one story that's not able to fit our script is the advancement of the Freedom Front Plus, and they're already standing at 104,472 votes throughout the country, giving them a 3.21 percentage count. And it's at this point that I'm going to bring in our guests, perhaps just to say hello for now. Professor Tefu, thank you so much for making the time to talk to us this morning.
Good morning.
And we're also joined by Professor Provincial from the CSIR. What are the numbers telling us? Are they tallying?
Good morning. Thus far, I think one of the things that we can look at is what is the predicted turnout. Although in the morning it was showing around about 61%, it's now showing that the predicted turnout is likely to end up at 65%. If we're looking at the final results for the different parties, so for ANC, we're looking at ANC ending up with 57.3%. So this means it's a drop from 2014 from 62% to
before you go into the
57.3%.
By global standards, 65% is a good turnout, isn't it? And the predictions were saying that a good turnout would not work for the ANC. Is that happening?
Certainly, okay. I would think that we were expecting the turnout to be less than the 2014 turnout. So 2014 it was around about 72% or so.
So there has been a decline.
So there has been a decline on the
Even
turnout.
if it's a good showing.
Yes, then, definitely.
All right, take us through those numbers that you were...
So the ANC, you can see that it has declined by around about 5. It'll end up declining by around about 5%. And when it comes to the DA, what we see is that the DA would be more or less similar to what it was in 2014, with a slight decrease of about 0.5%. If we go a little bit more deeper into where has these decreases occurred, this decrease for the DA occurred, previously, if we look at the votes, a lot of them have come from the urban areas, but we find that in the urban areas it's more or less maxed out. So they had, we see that DA has increased a little bit in the township areas. In particular, if you look at Soweto, it has increased by 1% in Soweto. So the decrease of 0.5% could actually be related to the increase in the Freedom Front Trust.
Professor Tefu, do your numbers tally with the numbers that Professor Deba is giving? What he says that the urban vote has reduced somewhat for the Democratic Alliance. Could that be attributed to the emphasis that the African National Congress tried to give to the middle class where they were losing support?
Yeah, that could be that the middle class voted with their feet in 2014. They just felt like, you know what, this is not what we want to identify with.
And in the local government election.
Yeah, and the new dawn seemed to have attracted them, and the development that followed the new dawn, in particular setting up the commissions and opening up the space for whistleblowing with a sense of cover, trying to get the right people in state-owned enterprises. These are the things that people factor in when they, especially the literate, the middle class. They don't necessarily go the route of personality cults, historical loyalties, and so forth. Many seem to process and rationalize their decisions. Yeah.
What can we attribute to the fortunes of the Freedom Front Plus? They've seen to really, they're already sitting at 104,472 votes, 3.21% of the votes counted so far. And just to remind our viewer that 26.22% of the votes have been counted already. What can we attribute to them gaining those fortunes?
Somehow I'm not even surprised. You know, I think, is it AfriForum? And the other one, if you look at what they've been doing in the interest of the Afrikaner, and to a large extent, and to some extent, in the interest of all, trying to fight for and defend the Constitution and the rule of law. You know, there is one example. You remember Madam, former First Lady of Zimbabwe. Nobody helped the young girl who was beaten up. They took it up, and some people tried to politicize it, and I said, but black organizations did nothing for her.
Yeah,
when AfriForum takes it up, then want to cry foul. Why were you quiet all along? Why didn't you deploy the resources to assist her? So on that sense, I'm saying they've done well for themselves, really, to garner the support of those who were hesitant, and again, protecting the interests of the Afrikaner in general. There's nothing wrong in that. all right? But they're trying to open up the space to be more inclusive.
The day after the elections, it's crunch time here in South Africa. We're counting the votes all over the country. And as we speak right now, the ANC is at 54.92, the Democratic Alliance 26.18, the EFF 8.19% of the votes counted. Remember, this is a developing story. Right now, we're going to go through to East London. My colleague Janine Lee is standing by in East London at the IEC Provincial Centre there. What is happening where you are, Janine? What can you tell us in terms of developments?
A very good welcome and morning to you, Desiree. I must say, I never thought that number crunching would be so exciting. I think we all hated mathematics at school, but when we look at numbers come election time, it takes on a whole different role. And I'm finding it fascinating as the numbers are coming in. Just over 38% actually of the votes in the Eastern Cape have been counted. But I will discuss that a little bit more. But quickly, I'm joined by the Provincial Police Commissioner here in the Eastern Cape, Liziwe Nchinga. Ma'am, how did your men and women in blue do yesterday? I know we had one or two problems in the province, but for the most part, things went very well.
Janine, I must confirm that men and women in blue in Eastern Cape, they were excellent yesterday. They did very well. Our plan was put in place for a long time. We studied the province. We went to all the places that we know that they were inaccessible. So we were all over the place. Our roving teams were placed strategically for any eventuality, just to calm down anything that can happen. So our men in blue, they really made us proud yesterday. But I want also to say the multidisciplinary task team comprised of all departments, JCPS cluster was also excellent because we were all hands-on. Anything that happens, we were able to direct the teams on the ground. So I can say that our plan was good. Even the incident of Ntabankulu, we were on top of the game because we managed to get there in time. The roads they were dark by the night, but in the morning we were there with our TLB to make sure that people want to go to vote, they were there. But
Can I just interrupt you? Can you just explain perhaps to our viewers, no voting at all took place in Ntabankulu. The police were there, the protesters were there, and people who wanted to vote were there. How come was no voting allowed? What is the role of the police? To what extent do you intervene?
We were there as the police to make sure that those who want to vote must vote. But we had to assess the situation because the situation was beyond the normal thing because it was violent. But our role also is to protect people who want to vote and also the protesters. So after we've assessed the situation, we will find out that we cannot continue. So that people must be safe. Remember, it's our role to make sure that people are safe.
Commissioner, I'm going to let you go. I know you've got a meeting this morning. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much.
So now we're going to have a little chat about some of the numbers that are coming through in the Eastern Cape. The CSIR predictions are very, very interesting. I'm going to have a chat now to our resident analyst here in the Eastern Cape, Professor Jolene Steenkotze. Jolene, hello again. Hi. It's that time. Let's have a look at some of the predictions coming through. So we've got the ANC predicted by CSIR just over 69%. What is this saying?
You know, I think if you kind of track since 1994 with the birth of our democracy and you look 25 years later on the performance of the ANC in its heartland, this particular political party was sitting at around 84% in 1994, and 25 years later it's declined to just below 70%. But it's not such a significant decline if the prediction is correct, because in 2014 it was sitting at around 71% of the vote in the Eastern Cape. Similarly, I think with the DA, what we saw was quite a big jump in growth between 2009 and 2014, but the predicted outcome shows a marginal growth for the DA in the province as the official opposition.
Jolene, and are you not surprised, we spoke earlier, you're not surprised that the EFF in the province has leapfrogged the UDM into third place?
No, not really, because the UDM as well is a party that has been on decline for quite a number of years. It was the official opposition, it was ousted as official opposition by COPE, and it never managed to regain that ground. So I would be quite interested to see, one, how the UDM fares in the province, but also if they actually do manage to get representation within the National Assembly once the final results come out.
Now, we saw a lot of new smaller parties popping up to contest these elections, 26 in the Eastern Cape in total. Now, on the radar, I see that making a slight little appearance there is the ATM.
Yes, the predicted result for the ATM is 1.14, which again, it's all right. It's a political party that is new. I think the political party runs the risk of maybe just being more of a provincial presence as opposed to more of a national presence like the AIC we saw. But of course, we know there was some controversy around confusion between the ANC and the AIC in previous elections.
And on a national level, the Good Party is also stepping up. From a provincial perspective, what can we expect from Patricia de Lille's party in your expectation?
Well, she hasn't popped up yet. I think in all probability what we may see happen is that the Good Party makes an appearance in more urban areas, but I doubt that it would be in a position to have captured the rural vote in the Eastern Cape.
Jolene, counting's going pretty well in the Eastern Cape. We're just over 38%. What do you think voter turnout is going to be in the province? Because, you know, we had all those service delivery protests where people said, listen, we weren't going to go to the ballot box.
Currently, when I looked at the latest stat, the current voter turnout is at around 61%, and the CSIR's prediction of voter turnout in the Eastern Cape is at 58.62%. And that is quite significant, I think, because we have to remember in this province, voter turnout was normally in the 80s, and then it declined to around 71% in 2014. So you're looking at a drop of approximately 13% in voter turnout in the province if these predictions are correct.
Now, all with our 26 parties here in the province, do you think there's going to be any surprise package that everyone might be blindsided by?
Well, I think it's still early days in terms of the counting, and we also need to be wary of some of the uncomfortableness around the electoral process. So I think one is also going to have to see how that is going to play out during the course of the day in the province.
And before we go back to Pretoria, let's briefly talk about Irvin Jim's party, the Social Revolutionary Workers' Party. What sort of impact do you think they're going to have, particularly maybe Nelson Mandela Bay, although this is not a municipal election?
You know, I am very interested in tracking Irvin Jim's Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party, predominantly because, again, it's a strong trade unionist background. We had the United Front in 2016, also with a strong union background. They didn't really make the splash I had expected. But I do think we may find in especially Buffalo City as well as Nelson Mandela Bay, your manufacturing hubs, so to speak, that this particular party could garner some support. But again, it could predominantly be urban, provincial type of entity.
Jolene, let's leave it at that. We'll be chatting to you later during the course of the day. We'll be updating you throughout the day as the numbers come in, but fascinating times and very, very interesting numbers. From us here in East London, it's back to you in Pretoria.
Janine, while we have you, I hope you're still there. Let's continue a bit with the number crunching, because even though the huge margin that the ANC is receiving in the Eastern Cape is said to be a decline from previous elections, if you look at the board, it's the only province where the ANC is way ahead of the party coming after it, which is the Democratic Alliance. But also the fortunes of the ATM party. Do we think that the leadership contestations that seemed to be taking place just on the eve of the elections could have damaged their chances?
You know what, Deidre, I'm going to put that question straight to our analyst. She's probably way better qualified to answer that than I am. Jolene, they were asking, the Eastern Cape's the only province where the gap between the ANC and the next party, the DA, is basically at this stage the widest. But they've alluded to the ATM and some of the problems that they have and some of the allegations on the eve of the elections leading up to voting. Do you think that those allegations that were spoken about just prior to elections might be damaging for the ATM?
You know, it's a question of having to wait and see. We need to remember that the Eastern Cape is traditionally the heartland of the ANC. Rich liberation history, Many of our struggle heroes were born and bred here. So it's not surprising that we see that gap. In terms of the allegations, we have to wait and see how the ATM takes that forward. If there is any merit in some of the concerns and allegations, and of course evidence of that, I think is going to be key. If that does not exist, then it could potentially damage the ATM in future as well.
Speaking about the new parties, do you think with some of them that perhaps there may be coalition talks at some stage and we may have new bedfellows as partners going forward?
I think at this point in time, not necessarily at a provincial level, but I do think it is something to look at maybe more at a local government election, perhaps the next round. We've already seen that in Nelson Mandela Bay. We've seen the ANC decline in Buffalo City Municipality, so that would also open up the space within a local government context for potential coalitions, where smaller parties, of course, then become the proverbial kingmaker.
Well, we've seen that with the ARC in Nelson Mandela Bay, as well as the Patriotic Alliance. So I think you're spot on with that. Desiree, I hope that Jolene's answered your question significantly and that it's a little clearer. As I say, I'm sure she knows more than I do at this stage when it comes to analysis. Desiree?
Thank you so much. Just to keep you up to date, 3,252,004 votes officially counted at this stage. The ANC standing at 55.07% of the vote, the DA at 25.96%, and the EFF at 8.28%. Ayanda Mhlongo is at the KZN IEC provincial counting station. Ayanda, a very good morning to you. What's the latest from your side?
Very good morning, Desiree, and good morning to our viewers. Well, it's been certainly a very long night, and it's going to be a long day for especially the political parties here in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. I tell you, Desiree, since the early hours of this morning, as they've started to come through to monitor these results, they've been fixed to the screens, fixed to their cell phones as they've been watching the results from the province of KwaZulu-Natal trickling in. But Desiree, one of the concerns, and it was raised, of course, yesterday, knowing that the incidents that took place in the province of KwaZulu-Natal leading up to the delays in many of the voting stations. And in fact, at 9 o'clock when voting stations closed, we still had in 2 areas here in the province a number of at least 6 voting stations where, although they were opened at about 4 o'clock, but the communities deciding in those areas to boycott the election. So a great deal of concern from last night when we spoke to the leaders of the political parties that the numbers of voters that came out in certain parts were very, very low, and so they were concerned about that. But let me bring in now our political analyst, Imran Bakas. Imran, thank you very much for your time. We've been here since the early hours of the morning. We've been monitoring results. We're still a bit low in terms of results that have been coming through, but let's firstly discuss the issue of the figures that we have, the percentages so far. We're looking at the turnout, the demonstrations that took place yesterday. Imran, was it expected? The particular concern from political parties that the turnout in KwaZulu-Natal seems to have dropped, but of course this is just the results from the results that we have so far.
Well, one is I think there's a bigger picture for us to look at. I think the turnout in KZN is not very dissimilar from what's happening nationally. So we've seen us come from about 75.9 to 63, which kind of resembles what happens at national or what's been happening at national. But on the other hand, I don't think the ANC has been doing enough to fire up the imagination of people in KZN. Ramaphosa had a particularly tough job, coming in KZN in the place of Zuma, who had huge support here, being in a province that resonated with Zuma very significantly. I think despite the fact that Ramaphosa was here a great number of times, focused on KZN, but I don't think enough was done to fire up the imagination of people. On the other hand, I think the protests that you talk about certainly had an impact. I think people have been disillusioned. People have been disillusioned in terms of the dismal state of their lives. And I think people have generally been disillusioned with electoral processes. So that on the one hand, people perhaps trying to convey to us that we go out and vote, but that doesn't necessarily have an impact on the state of our lives. So I think in that respect, people may have stayed away, and certainly the problems we had yesterday would have also impacted on people not reaching the polls.
Let's just take a look now at some of the of our results. You're speaking about the ANC currently with about 11.5 of the VDs having counted. They're standing at 56.3%. But interestingly enough, now let's look at the IFP is now coming in at second. Then the DA. Of course, the DA was the official opposition in KwaZulu-Natal. If the results continue as they are we going to likely now? Are we able at this point now, Imran, to look at a change in the official opposition? Who will become the official opposition in KwaZulu-Natal?
Well, it's tough to say at this point with so few of the votes counted, but I think the IFP dynamic is really interesting. If one looks at the IFP graph from 94, there's a sort of steady decline. If you take KZN, the IFP began in 94 with over 40% of the vote. And in the last national election, 2014, it reached about 10. And now we're already seeing they are double that. So clearly that's significant. But I think we need to trace the history slightly. During the Zuma era, we had the Zuma masterstroke of kind of debilitating the IFP by the sort of strategic insertion of the NFP. And I think that had a dramatic impact. But once you started to see the decline of the IFP started to garner those votes. And I think with the almost complete implosion with the NFP, all of those votes have almost certainly gone to the IFP. The other point I'd like to make about the IFP is, in many ways, it's rebranding. It's not the IFP of yesteryear. It's not the IFP of 2009 or 2014. This is an IFP that's indicating that it has significant resources. It's an IFP that's showing that it has a new, young, urbane, cosmopolitan leadership arising. It's a leadership that's kind of disrupting the narrative of a Zulu nationalist party. It's a young leadership that's also reaching out to young people across the board. And I think that's inspiring. I don't think it's a young leadership that's saying this is a Zulu nationalist party. It's a young leadership that's saying that 50% of South Africans are under 30. We need to get that vote. South Africa is a multicultural society, and I think they're doing well in terms of reaching out to that vote.
Would that be possibly because we have seen the current provincial chairperson, Velenkosini Hlabiso, who has been tipped to take over after Inkosi Mangosuthu Buthelezi, and we saw the youth chairperson, Mkhuleko Hlengwa, also come out during this campaign?
Yeah, and both of these individuals in the IFP do inspire confidence. I think the IFP needs change. It's been a party kind of focused on one leader. And I think with all of the dynamic changes happening in the country and certainly in KZN, this young leadership inspires hope. And I think the IFP is doing well in terms of reaching not only the emerging black middle class vote, but certainly the rural vote and the vote of those who live on the margins of KZN.
You mentioned the NFP, and we'll probably get back to them, but very briefly, the EFF. Interestingly, point that I was speaking about in the hostels in KwaMashu, traditionally IFP stronghold, but we're picking up that the EFF has done well in that. Very briefly on the EFF.
Yeah, so several dynamics. One is I think about 6 million of young voters were not registered, but despite that the EFF is capturing a significant number of voters. I think linked to that strategic approach is the fact that the EFF controls a number of student commands at university. And from 1% to what they're sitting at currently, I think it's a really significant and dramatic improvement.
All right, Imran, thank you very much for your time. And I know we'll still be continuing to monitor the results here at the Operations Center in Durban. So certainly a lot more to talk about, but let's leave it there for now, Desiree, and back to you in studio.
Thank you so much there from Ayanda. As you heard, the KZN being the only province, especially in terms of the provincial picture, that's changing the national picture, where it's usually ANC, DA, EFF. In this case, it's the ANC ahead, then follows the IFP, followed by the DA, and then the EFF. Let's go now to the Free State Provincial IEC Center, where Ishmael Mudiba is standing by. Ishmael, what picture is forming in your province?
Well, good morning. Well, we are still here at the IEC at the Rock Station here, where the votes are trickling in. Earlier on, when we checked around 6 o'clock, when we checked the stats on the visuals here, we could see that the ANC was still leading, followed briefly by the DA, the EFF, and that is the situation up to now. Earlier on, when I spoke to the one of the officials from the IEC, said out of the 19, we've got 19 municipalities in the province, and in total we had about 1,529 voting stations, and out of that they had already managed to capture 364 voting stations, and at that particular time they were left with 1,165 voting stations to capture. So it's still work in progress, but earlier on we were out of electricity for about 2 hours. Just before you came back to me, we just had electricity that has been restored. But to tell us more about voting, I've got with me Matabo Rasengane, who is the spokesperson of the IEC, just to give us a clearer picture of the situation so far. Matabo, good morning and welcome again.
Good morning.
Tell us, in terms of voting, where are we in the province so far?
Well, all voting stations are closed. We closed at around 11, the last voting station, and capturing started, or counting started after that. And after counting, results were pouring in at our MEO offices. And the auditors are there as well. And here as well, we have auditors that are busy confirming what has been captured so that we can broadcast it on our screen. So that's what we have been doing so far, and we are happy with the progress. 364 already captured out of the 1529 that we have. It's a progress, slowly but surely.
Earlier on, we were without electricity for about 2 hours. Electricity just came back as we were about to speak. Let's speak about the challenge, and as the IEC, how are you dealing with that so that work can progress smoothly here?
Well, we had a commitment from ESCOM or Centlec that we won't experience such challenges, but it's some of those things that are out of their control. Apparently, this whole area of Hamilton ran out of electricity, hence they came back with a backup generator.
And from here, what can you expect with other regions that or other voting stations that still need to, forward their numbers?
Well, we can expect an increase, of course, of these ballots that have been captured, and we are expecting that at least by 4 o'clock will be done. Because, of course, our colleagues are still a bit exhausted. Some of them have went home to rest. But we are expecting that at 4 o'clock we'll have all the results and verified so that we know what is happening.
And we know that on your states, the Free State, you had about 1.4 million registered voters. In terms of people who managed to go to various stations to cast their votes, how are the numbers up to when captured? Have you been seeing a good number of people going to make their mark? Can you give us the clearer picture?
Okay, we've got 1.4 million voters so far with the states that we have. Even though it's not complete, we have about 680,000 that casted their ballots. This is excluding day 1 and day 2 of special votes. It's only yesterday's states that we have. It's not complete, like I said. We are just about to reach 50%, because our 50% will be more or less 700,000. So we are expecting that after compiling all the statistics, we would have reached at least 50% of our voters who have casted their votes.
And remember, just a day before Wednesday, we had some other areas in the Free State, in Viljoenskroon, in Marquardt, where people were protesting, service delivery protests. But in those areas, as the IEC, how did you manage to continue to conduct voting with regard to those challenges?
With the assistance of the SAPS, of course, they beefed up security in both areas. In Viljoenskroon, the voting station that was affected, it was a side side hall, and we moved everything to the main hall. So voting continued or proceeded as expected in the main hall. And in Marquardt, the 12 voting stations that were affected, they opened late around 10 o'clock, but because SAPS was present, then our security was beefed up and our voters managed to go to the voting stations without any interference or hindrances.
I know that provincially, when can we exactly know the final stats to know where are we standing as a province?
Like I said, around 4 o'clock this afternoon, we'll probably have everything. We are working as hard as we can that we capture everything and we balance our statistics as we get them from our local offices. So by 4 o'clock, hopefully, we will have all the results.
Well, Desiree, that's what we heard from Matabara Singane, that is the spokesperson of the IEC in the Free State, and it's back to you in the studio, Desiree.
Thanks a lot there to Ishmael. Now to a province that also has a deviation from the national picture where it's not the progression is not ANC-DA, but in Limpopo it's the ANC, the EFF, the DA and then the Freedom Front Plus, but it's also that province where an IEC official was suspended because of a loss of ballots that were found by the roadside. You remember that story trended, and we're going to now connect through to Chifiwa Mbedzi, who is at the Provincial IEC Center. Chifiwa, what's happening where you are?
Good morning, Desiree. We are still here at the IEC in Limpopo, Polokwane, where earlier on we brought you an update on the counting of the results of the elections, basically focusing on the provincial elections. Right now, the IEC has informed us that the counting is done, and now they're busy with the capturing. And in terms of capturing, they're still at 13%. But looking at Limpopo, this is a province where 34 parties are contesting in this year's elections. Now, something really interesting has happened because we find that a new structure, the Good Party, a fairly new structure, has gained a representation in this province. Now, to hear much about the Good Party, I'm going to speak now to the provincial coordinator of the Good Party, Ms. Ronelle Steenkamp. Thank you for allowing us time to speak to you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Now, looking at what is your impression of the overall process, the way you saw the IEC in Limpopo handling these elections?
Well, with the difficulties that I've heard, we didn't experience any with our party people. But yeah, there's a few that we heard of, and I think it will be sorted out as quick as possible, and yeah, they handled it well from our side.
And now, looking at the representation that you're getting from Limpopo province, what is it that, what background work did you do in your manifesto that made you believe that you're going to gain some strong support here in Limpopo province?
I think our leader, Mrs. Little, did the right thing to say she wants to fix South Africa. There's a lot of, there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of service delivery failures. We can go on. There's a lot of failures in our province that must be set right. Poverty is one of it. The people is without work. They must have a look at that, see if they can do to stop that. And yeah, we can go on for long. There's a lot of stuff not, how can I say, that can be done.
So having said that, Ronelle, what appeal does Patricia de Lille bring now to the table of the voters who have swayed into the Good Party?
Can you...
What is it that Patricia de Lille is now going to bring to the voters who have swayed into the Good Party?
I believe what she said in her manifesto, to fix, to see what she can do, to see that poverty be handled, and that they will look after the education, because why that's a lack. We can go on. There's a lot of stuff that is lack of interest here that people didn't look after, and the fraud, especially the fraud.
Okay, so should you get a seat in the Limpopo legislature, what can we expect going forward? What are you going to contribute?
Especially, I think we would start with poverty, the work, opportunities of work for the people. Yeah, we must have a meeting after this election, sit with the head office so that we can do what we can do together to change things here in our province.
The main focus being poverty, you say?
Poverty, education, water. There's a really struggle with water in some of the rural areas. The people doesn't have water. The roads are poor condition, very, very poor condition. The housing, the RTP houses that's built is in poor state. It's not good structures. So, yeah, as you know, it's not nice to stay in something like that and without water. All of us need water. So I think that is our main objectives to start with.
Well, thank you so much. There we have it. That was the provincial coordinator of the Good Party, Ms. Ronelle Steenkamp, just giving us an insight on their some of the goals of their manifesto and how they managed to get a representation here in the Limpopo province. As of now, as I've indicated earlier on, the counting has been done, and what the IEC officials are currently busy with is the capturing. And we shall update you as soon as we have that information. It's back to you in studio.
Chifiwa Mbedzi coming to us from the Limpopo Provincial IEC Center a day after the elections, number crunching and 26.22% of the vote counting done. Early indications showing an ANC lead. And of course, as we know, as this progresses, pictures could change. But as we speak right now, the ANC at 55.07 of the count, 25.96 for the Democratic Alliance, and 8.28% for the Economic Freedom Fighters. Let's go now to Tumelo Machoho, who is standing by for us at the Mpumalanga Provincial IEC Center. Tumelo, what story is developing on your side?
Well, the voting is coming in, and also they're starting to count the votes here in Mpumalanga province. About 30% of the votes have already been counted so far, and also we understand that in Victor Khanye municipality they've completed counting the votes there. That's in the Delmas area. That's very close to the Gauteng area. It's a very small town and it's a small municipality, so that vote has already been done. So far we know that the ANC is leading in the province with about 66%, and the DA is coming there at 13%. The EFF right there in about 12%. In the top 5, we can also see that the EFF Plus is also there with about 4%, which is the first time the EFF Plus have made an inroads into this province. But let's talk more about the numbers with our political analyst, Kaya Sithole. Kaya, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let's talk about the ANC. They have like about 66%, and the process is still going on, but it looks like the ANC will lead with a high majority at this stage.
Look, I mean, we are at around 30% calculation of voting districts. So, of course, voting districts do not necessarily correlate to the number of voters. Some districts are bigger than others, but I do think that the trend that we're seeing is that the ANC will emerge victorious. It really just becomes a question of how big the margin of victory is going to be. And I do suspect that compared to 2014, at least, you're going to see a decline in the ANC simply because there's going to be some growth from the EFF side, but also quite importantly, the Freedom Front seems to have made particular inroads. And my suspicion is that really when you look at the type of people that would vote for the Freedom Front Plus, it is people who have taken some exception to perhaps the views expressed by the EFF and the ANC talking about the concept of land expropriation without compensation. And of course, the Freedom Front Plus has been very clear in that it opposes that policy. So for some people, that would have been a safe vote to say, let us give them some muscle in the next parliament so that they can argue to be against the amendment of Section 25. So I do think that it was to be anticipated, but a lot of people didn't actually think that it was going to be so amplified even in a province like this one.
But looking at especially the FFF plus, this is their first time making inroads in this province, and also the fact that they didn't even campaign in this province. It's quite shocking because they're getting these numbers, especially in the rural parts where it's mostly farm work and also farms in those areas. How did they do this? How did they manage to get into this? We know that the issues of land and all those kind of things is a very tough situation, especially in Mpumalanga, because people have been claiming lands, but also there's been a lot of fight around this issue of this land.
I think the way the Freedom Front Plus ran its campaign is really it just understood what its core constituency is, and it focused its activities on that core constituency. And sometimes that tends to be not very visible to the public eye. So of course, when people go to the big political rallies, those political rallies speak to a particular constituency. And if you've decided or you've taken a position that our constituency is perhaps the farm owners who feel that that land is under threat, then you simply target your marketing specifically towards them, and they might not make it to the public discourse because a lot of people probably are far away from the farms. Generally, farms tend to be away from the big city areas where perhaps the access to information and the access to media outlets is much greater. So it sort of becomes a really invisible and a backdoor campaign, and it seems to have worked very well for the Freedom Front Plus. Now, of course, I think after these elections, they might actually come out and say exactly how it is that they achieve this, and if they're going to maintain this momentum and even get up to 5% in a province like Mpumalanga, which has been a traditional ANC stronghold, it will call upon the ANC and perhaps the other two big parties, being the DA and the EFF, to question themselves on how they missed this, because clearly this was a low-hanging fruit.
There were 28 parties contesting in the provincially in this province. We look at the ATM; it's a new party. They're number 6, but they've also been having like infighting within the party. But that has not seemed like it deterred voters, especially in this province, because they're number 6.
Yeah, I think when new parties emerge, of course, there's always going to be a question of how do they learn to actually find the right balance between who should be the leaders, the champion particular causes, and who should be the backroom engine of that particular party. And I think when you look at the ATM, a lot of people would have thought that somebody like Zwanele Manye would have put his position forward and said he wants to be the leader of it, but I think he's decided that he wants to be running the back office side and put somebody else as a presidential candidate, which was a good strategy because I think historically he's always been associated with the ANC and not necessarily the good parts of the ANC, so it would have alienated a lot of people if he had put himself forward as the only candidate that was going to champion the cause of the ATM. But I do think that even in a province like this, there is always a need for alternative voices, and a lot of people simply take the view that rather than sitting out an election because they are uncomfortable or unhappy with how the big parties have conducted themselves over their previous mandates, and then they'll say, let me go to the ballot paper and give the mandate to someone else, if for nothing else, just to have some sense of accountability, to force the big parties to then actually answer to someone else. So I do think that it's a combination of people simply saying, we're unhappy with the big parties, we're looking for an alternative, this looks like it's an alternative that is new, it is speaking perhaps to a few key issues that matter to us. And I think what you also see that the small parties do very well is that because they've got a limited budget, they cannot have a manifesto that talks about 30 or 40 different issues. They literally have to pick and choose a few core issues that they're going to champion and make sure that they really drum that message. And of course, that message is definitely going to resonate with some particular people. For example, if you look at the ACDP, they're very clear about their position on really how this secular state must essentially be transformed into a religious state. And of course, there's a lot of people who are religious, so that message is going to resonate with them. So it's always a matter of pick a constituency, attack it, and really do all the best you can to score the votes in there.
And surprisingly, ACDP is number 5, which is they've been there the longest. They should have done better, especially in this province where we see like people that are quite religious and they're it's quite a rural area. They should have done better, but they didn't do that well.
Look, I think for me the ACDP has always been a party that champions the religious cause, but when people go to the ballot, they're really looking for a holistic range of solutions. It's not just a matter of you championing a particular way in which the state needs to engage with its citizens. So of course, this being a predominantly Christian country, that's always going to resonate with particular people. But for a lot of people for whom the core issues are not necessarily aligned to the issues of religion, if people are looking for questions around the economy, access to education, access to healthcare, of course for them, they will get to the ballot box and say, look, the ACDP has only spoken about a couple of particular issues. We are looking for somebody who champions a much broader range of issues. And of course, one doesn't need to vote the ACDP in order to participate in the religious fraternity anyway. So it's not like there is something that the ACDP sells that is unique to other political parties. So I do think some people do it as a form of attachment to it, but it's not really the type of party that sells a holistic range of solutions to the electorate.
Kaya, thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. That was Kaya Sitole. He's the political analyst. So far, we understand that the turnout of the votes is about over 60%. So we don't know if that turnout has been affected by maybe protests that are taking place and around this Mpumalanga, because we understand on voting day there was a lot of protest and also people preventing people from going into voting station, threatening people to go into voting station, and also voting station not have enough ballot papers to continue with voting in some areas. So we will be watching this story as it develops here, Desiree.
Thank you, Tumelo Machoho, coming to us from Mpumalanga. Let's get back to our esteemed guests here in the studio, Professor Lisiba Defu and Professor Pravesh Deba from the CSIR. Let's just look at separate the national and the provincial pictures. The national picture is showing what was predicted, that the ANC would be ahead, followed by the DA and the EFF. But let's talk about the margins. Are those expected? ANC quite ahead already, having passed the 2 million mark, and DA trailing at 1 million.
If we're looking at the margins nationally, then we can see that for the ANC, it is trailing by what our model is showing is that it will end up trailing by about 5%.
Trailing.
It's trailing by
the ANC.
Yeah.
Okay. Prof, your thoughts on the national picture for now, and just how that kind of the separation, the gap between the African National Congress and the DA and the EFF?
Look, I think it falls within the predictions of several polls. At the same time, I would still say early days. The scientists would have their way to look at it, but until late in the hour, I can begin to say, or to draw from my experience as a Sangoma trainee, how far we are going. But yes, the DA is number 2, ANC number 1, DA number 2, number 3, EFF. But what excites me in this, there was an expectation of the ATM performing well. More surprising is the performance of the Freedom Front Plus.
Yes.
You look at it even in Mpumalanga, it's putting up a very strong showing.
Steadily sitting at number 4 nationally.
Right? I mean, it's a cause for research.
Yes.
But there is practical evidence that attests to why people might have been drawn to them.
Whereas the Freedom Front Plus has a track record, the Good Party is a new baby on the block. What can we attribute to their good performance in this election?
Well, look, I'm not sure what to say about it at this stage.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the numbers, about 20,000 at national. I see in Limpopo, they might have been showing fairly well. But
they're also doing quite well in the Western Cape.
Even in but that was to be expected. I'm one of those who speak about ethnicity. You know, African politics, not South African politics, African politics in the main.
That's important.
They draw from ethnic extraction in the main, ethnic, tribal, regional, are sentiments that tend to draw people together. Afrikaner nationalism. There's another nationalism in the Western Cape, and people are looking at it in the sense that at least Delil is one of our own. Maybe we should go with him, regardless of the track record. Yes, there is that sentiment that tend to draw people to certain parties, and they cannot even rationalize
Interesting
why
perspective there, Prof. We're going to come back to it, but right now, let's go to the Nelson Mandela Bay. Our colleague Jade Lee Pauls is standing by. What is happening on your side, Jade Lee?
A very good morning, Desiree, from Nelson Mandela Bay, where the counting is happening right here. A lot of the political parties have been camped here since last night. Very tired faces that I'm seeing, but I'm going to rope in the IEC official at the station, Mr. Crosby Baqela, just to tell us how it went, over these few hours, and also with regards to that tent. We saw a tent being blown over at Soweto here in Port Elizabeth. Did that also hinder the counting process? Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Baqela. How has it been so far?
No, Jade, I think everything is going very well. I think in terms of our counting, our capturing, is going very well. You know, you'll remember that our municipality is divided into two. We've got the Utinek and we've got PE. The VDs that are located in Utinek, they've been captured 100%. We are now dealing with the VDs that are here in PE. I know that you referred to the tent that yesterday. You know, the weather was not really kind to us. That reminded me of the 3rd of August 2016. But I can say to you that really it did not interfere with the processes, because after the tent had actually blown out, we actually conducted the commission, of which the commission gave a go-ahead so that we can occupy any structure that is not very far from the voting station. I think everything went very well.
And when I was taking a drive as well, we saw that everything was speedy, the presiding officers were in place, and that the people were happy. They managed to cast their votes and close those stations at 9 o'clock. So everything looked very well here in the Eastern Cape, and especially in Nelson Mandela Bay.
No, definitely. You know, it's about planning, because our planning, we have executed it very well, with the exception of the weather, because really we didn't know what is going to happen here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baqela. So there you have it. Everything went speedy and everything went well here in the metro. But I think it's also the political parties who are eagerly awaiting the last trickling number of votes. I'm going to start here with the DA, Bobby Stevenson. Bobby, very excited. How are you guys faring, and are you guys happy with the results so far?
Yes, well, the results that we've seen, the DA is very confident that we will grow our support in Nelson Mandela Bay above what we got in 2014. As you probably all aware, when you looked at those results from 2014, both the DA and the ANC were in the 40s, and we're confident that we're going to grow. I'm very happy with the initial results that I've seen.
Thank you very much, Bobby. We're just going to take a walk over to the ANC, which is doing very, very well across the country and also in the Eastern Cape. Ma'am, are you guys happy with the results so far?
Thank you very much. We are very happy with the results. Also, considering the weather conditions of yesterday, we think that we've done well, and we could have even done more if the conditions were not as such.
Okay, thank you. And then also a party that's sitting at 7.20% of the votes here in the Nelson Mandela Bay region, voting in the National Assembly, and that is the EFF. Let's find out from them. How are they feeling about the results?
Thank you, ma'am. We are feeling very happy about the results, but we need to mention the credibility of the IEC. We are doubting the credibility of the IEC here in the whole South Africa. As we were busy moving around the region, we noticed that there are VTs that were not having scanners. Even there were people that were voting twice or thrice within the region. But we thank the EFF fighters who marshaled and worked hard in making sure that the victory of the EFF is certain. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. So views from the EFF saying they're not really happy with the way it has been handled, but other parties are very happy with the trickling of results coming in, and we've been crisscrossing the metro, speaking to people how they feel this morning. A lot of the people on the ground saying they're very excited that their political parties of choice are doing so well, and we'll be keeping you abreast with everything that's happening in the Eastern Cape with my colleagues crisscrossing around the province and also from Nelson Mandela Bay. It's back to you in studio.
Thank you so much. We're just going to go back to KZN in a moment, but I want to quickly touch with Professor Defu about the IEC. One of the EFF interviews there saying that they're unhappy with some of the processes within the IEC, but the IEC assuring voters and stakeholders in a statement yesterday of an overall integrity of the process, saying that they have the checks and the safeguards to make sure that this is a credible election. Your thoughts on this conversation?
So far, so good. Never undermine the magnitude of this enterprise. It's a big one, and it is bound to have glitches.
So it can't be 100%.
It can't be 100%,
perfect.
but that is the ideal we should strive for. But is the cumulative effect of this concerns and glitches that one may want to factor? But they're so small that I wouldn't want really to begin to glorify those who want to undermine the integrity of the process for whatever reason. And indeed, let them come up forward with the evidence, let it be dealt with. The sooner the better, because when the certificate is issued, we don't want people to cry foul and say it would have been different. Advance the evidence, adjust the evidence, let it be adjudicated. The court, the electoral court is ready to address the issues. But I don't want to hear people talk about their concerns post factum. Then that would be sour grapes.
So the reported indiscretion is not part of the full picture there. Let's go now to KZN. Sibonga Bonke Mbata is standing by outside of the IEC provincial offices. Sibonga, what's happening where you are?
A very good morning to you, Desiree, as we continue to monitor the votes, the results rather, as they continue to slowly trickle in. In KwaZulu-Natal, current updates indicate that there was a lower vote turnout, but we will be keeping track of that as the day progresses. But just to get a feel of how the entire counting process is happening, I have with me Babmawe to Mozuri to give us an update in terms of how everything is happening here in KZN. A very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, and thank you for having us, and we're pretty satisfied with what we're doing so far.
Give us an update in terms of the counting process. I understand that earlier on we had attempted to go closer to the City Hall, but we were told it's gridlocked because the counting is in session. We can't go anywhere near it. Just give us a sense of how's the counting process happening, because we understand that in different parts it's relatively stagnant. There's a slow start. Was this an impact of all what we saw yesterday? Some voting stations not opening on time, some not opening at all?
Well, we have the results for most of our voting stations in KwaZulu-Natal, and we have those in our offices now in the various municipalities. However, in eThekwini we had voting stations, about 300 of them, which completed the voting process at about 1 a.m. this morning, and it's largely your voting stations that have a very high number of voters, like the Durban City Hall and a few in Umlazi, as well as the area of Kitomeno where there was voting until very late. So the counting there began at around 3 a.m. and it will continue probably until about midday. The estimation in these venues is around 5,000 or so voters that arrived to vote, and you have both those who are on the roll there and those who came with it through the Section 24A process. So the counting process is basically remaining in a few very big stations in eThekwini area, but everywhere else in the province we now have the results.
Yesterday's challenges, did they have any impact in starting the counting process?
Not really, in exception for voting stations where voting was still taking place, but everywhere else we started with the count on time around 9:30 p.m. or at 10 p.m. last night, and it continued until the early hours. But there's obviously the added time frame of transporting the results, especially in our rural voting stations, the distances and elements of managing fatigue. We've been very strict about the driving as well as the security that is attached to transporting these results to our municipal offices. But we are satisfied now that we have most of the results in our possession. We've started the process of capturing them. We've already authenticated just about 10% of the results in the province, but working with the audit process, we will continue to release results of the province.
Sorry, just to go back a bit, speaking about voting stations, the challenges, of course, and we understand that there were quite a few that ended up not operating at all, and voters in those particular areas were deprived of their democratic right to vote. Does the IEC accommodate them? What are the chances of them being accommodated at all?
Well, we did open all voting stations in the province. The 5 that opened very late in the day at around 1600 hours were the 4 in Bergville and the 1 in Dr. Langalibalele municipality. And all of those operated until 9 p.m. And we hope that those who actually wanted to vote did vote. And hopefully there are none that we left out because they had been intimidated and other. But certainly those areas require our attention in terms of promoting democracy in them and making them appreciate the electoral process. Where we are today, we can't give them an opportunity. The process has run its course, it's completed in terms of those areas.
So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
That was, of course, Babu Bawetu Mozuri giving us an update as far as KwaZulu-Natal's results count is going. He's saying that they're quite satisfied for now. They have a majority of the votes in their possession, and he has just given us clarity in terms of the voting station, because we understand that during yesterday's election day, KwaZulu-Natal was one province that was engulfed with some challenges from various voting stations, but he's just assured us that everyone who actually wanted to vote actually did have access to vote regardless of the challenges. We will be continuing to monitor the vote count as the day goes along. It's back to you in studio.
Usibonga konke Mbatha there from KZN. Let's continue with our conversation. Professor Defu, going into the elections, KZN and the Northwest were flagged as hotspot provinces in terms of possibility of violence. Your thoughts post the election? Was it smooth enough?
Look, for me, we have done very well. And I can say with confidence that very little can still be done to mar the integrity of the entire process. The glitches are so minimal that we didn't really put a high premium on them. However, there are lessons to learn from them so that tomorrow we don't repeat the same thing unless they even have a domino effect. But I saw a very strong show of force by the army and the SAPS, even the traffic officers and so on and so forth in Northwest. And I thought it was a very good preemptive strike. It might really have influenced people one way or another. And I'm one of those who say, you have the right not to vote, but at least let your right not impede others from exercising their rights.
Absolutely.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And in KwaZulu-Natal, we have seen a few souls unfortunately being lost en route to the elections. But on the day itself, people seem to have been more tolerant.
Yeah.
And I remember in is it in Ulundi, where Nkosi Buthelezi cast his vote. I saw the ANC and the IFP singing and dancing together. And I thought, what a development. Yesteryears, we would not have anticipated or fathomed that at all.
Professor Deba, let's go back to the number crunching. Let's talk about the splits between the national vote and the provincial vote. What sort of numbers do you have for us there?
Well, that's actually quite interesting because what we are predicting is when we are looking at the ANC in Gauteng, the way people have voted. So at a national level, people have voted around about, we are predicting that it will end up around about 55% for Gauteng, for the ANC. Whereas the provincial votes, what we are predicting is that it will end up at 49%, which can actually lead to a coalition as well. And if we look at the Western Cape, it actually was the similar pattern exists for the DA, where at a provincial level, the DA had 55%, and at national level, we are estimating it to be around 51–52%.
Let's go now to Aphumelele Mdlalane, who is standing by for us in the Free State. Aphumelele, where are you and what's the latest development in this province?
Desiree, I'm near Bethlehem at this other farm. This is where we could see that at least about 30 people are staying in this farm. And what is quite sad, Desiree, is that some couldn't make their vote yesterday. They couldn't go this long distance. We understand that the young people managed to walk long distances. It's about 20 kilometers to the voting station. But with me right now, I'm joined by a 74-year-old Mapuga Mema Mokoena. How go re qoqele fela wena o ikutlwa jwang hore ha wa vota maobane?
Ke bohloko mme ke a vota maobane ke ikemiseditse. Jwale ke hloka mangwele a nghana ka nnete gore go ke itsamaele. Ke hlokile ntho e nlatang.
Mme o ile a hlalosa hore o na santsane a tinne hantle monana.
Re ke feletswe ke ka nnete jwale ka ile ga laelwa ka mane ka ntho ka ten hall. Ho itswe re apara ntho tsena tsa mokgatlo ke khone hore ke vote ha ke no botsa ntho tse ngata ke fihla ka moo mara ke hloleile ho fihlella
kganthi mme ho no etsahetseng plan ine le hore le tlo latwa ke koloi ho etsahetseng hantlentle
ine ka re tla latwa ke koloi jwale ha ya ka ba ka e bona koloi e bona tse di feta di ya mane dithabeng kwana di ya kwana di khutla mane di kene ha ya kena en kuka nna mona ene ke ne ke se ke le mo fela mona ba taba se ile ka ofela
jwale mme o tlo etsang jwale ene tlo ba nako ya hae ya pele a vota kapo gale o ile wa vota before
ke vota mme ke go ke kgetlo la bokae la bogago pola bone a ke sa opula jwale le modia ya jwale le nna ke sa opula ntle
mme sense a utlwile bohloko o na bona hore
ke ba ka vota ka shekule
mme o na bona hore bohlokwa ba vote ke eng ho yena
ke ne ke bona la bohlokwa ba vote ke eng ho nna ba ke batle o nna ke tsa ke kena sekolo mona ke faila ke ya ho sena sekolo ke batla kolo se le seng fela
wena ho wena vote o no batla bona ditshebeletso difi
ke batla bona ditshebeletso tse bang di ntobile ke difeng bela ha ke bone ke tsherane fela ke robetse ke sa sena monate le kelelong ya ka
mme ha re bue mona na maemo ga bona hore o dula mona na plasing e ka ba ona le tsona ditshebeletso re bua ka metsi re bua ka motlakase ha go go hlalosetse
le metsi ha le teng mana ha ke sa khona le ho ala tanketang ka be thoko mana ha ba sa tlisa jelo ka pele na ba tlisa mona hekeng haka ke tapele tonka tsa ka ke tsela di bona di ngata ka ntle ka jwale ha ba sa tla le bona a ke sa tsebana ho etselang ke utlwe jalo ke kgathetse le nna ke sa tsebana ka re
mme ha tsofetse jwale
metsi a pula ka nnete ha pula e nele ke hona ke thola metsi
clinic yona mme
clinic ka nnete yona ntse ba ntlisetsa dipidisi ke tsene le fihlile maobane mo ntse ba tlisa dipidisi ntse ke dina dipidisi tsa bona ka nnete ene ho thwe ke tsa high blood beto thola tsona tsa high blood mara ha o le thata ke ya toropong ke chemistry ke ga ke tse nthusang go utlwana ho etsalang
Desiree, 74-year-old Mapuga Mokoena, she was exactly born here and she's saying it wouldn't be the first time she cast her vote if she got an opportunity yesterday. And she says that it's very important that she also votes because there are changes that she would love to see in this area. She is saying that she has no access to electricity, she has no access to water. They are struggling here and it's quite a long distance even to access the healthcare services. As I mentioned to you, Desiree, it's just this farm is near Bethlehem, but you wouldn't walk, of course, just like even it was a struggle even for young people to walk to the voting station here where it's about 20 kilometers away, but we can see that the 74-year-old grandmother was saying that maybe it was going to be her last vote. To her, it was going to be very important that she votes yesterday, and she was already wearing her ANC clothing and also ready to go and cast her vote. And she is saying now she's quite devastated because these people were coming in their numbers here when they were saying to her that they will come, of course, and make arrangements of transportation so that she can vote. But now she was disappointed on her last day that she couldn't be able to cast her vote. This is just one of the farms. We will visit another farm. We understand that many people from the farms here, many people from the farms near Bethlehem, or rather in the Eastern Free State, they struggled because also the weather was bad yesterday. It was heavily raining, so there were quite challenges where elderly people couldn't make it to the voting stations. But for now, Desiree, it's back to you in studio.
It must be quite devastating, especially when you have registered and shown a willingness to vote. And that's Aphumelele Mdlalane. Will be going back to her when she moves on to another farm. And just to wrap up the segment of our broadcast before we go back to Johannesburg, 4,166,525 votes already counted. Professor Defu, what are the outstanding, the biggest stories coming out of these early indications for you?
What I thought would be a bloodbath of the smaller Nyana parties, it seems it's going to eventualize. It's going to happen. It was good that they showed up, about 48 of them, lessons learned, but maybe people must appreciate. There is what is called residual votes. Some may still get that, but by far, a sizable chunk of the votes are going to be destroyed.
Yes.
I'm looking at the famous African content movement of Mr. Mtsweneng, who's supposed to be sworn in, by the way, today at the Union Building. Where is he now in terms of performance? I'm looking at the UDM in terms of performance, right? It seems they are on the decline, despite their leader.
Actually, the only province where the UDM is featuring at number 4 is in the Eastern Province, but even there, they're trailing, and the ATM fastly approaching.
Right. Given that, and their leader, I regard as a corruption buster, but I think he's taking some knock for how he handled the Nelson Mandela Bay debacle, the coalition. I didn't think he didn't acquit himself well. Many people thought he put personal interests rather than national or provincial interests at heart.
Thanks for your inputs. Professor Deba, your last thoughts?
Firstly, I would agree because according to our predictions for COPE, we are looking at COPE being reduced by about 50% compared to the last elections, and same with UDM as well. When it comes to Freedom Front Plus, then we are looking at, our prediction is saying that it could go as high as about 3%, but if we are a little bit conservative, I think compared to the last elections, you are looking at least double.
Thank you so much for staying with us in the past 2 hours, Professor Pravesh Deba from the CSIR and Professor Lisiba Defu. As we said, it's a developing story. 4 million votes counted already. The ANC at a national level already at 2,345,725. Let's go back to Johannesburg now, where my colleague Blaine Herman is standing by.
Desiree, thank you very much indeed. Stand by. We'll come back to you. That's the Nerve Centre, the National Results Operations Centre in Pretoria. We're continuing our rolling coverage of elections 2019. Just a reminder with regard to complaints and objections. The IEC says all complaints or objections received on any of the voting days will be resolved immediately. That's the assurance they're giving us. There's sufficient authority at presiding officer level, at provincial electoral officer level, as well as where Desiree is, the National Results Operations Centre. Now, we're told at the ROC, where Desiree is, there are about 100 people who will be dealing with those queries. Now, there will also be a team dealing with the queries that come through social media. That's important as well. Okay, let's get some of the numbers on our touch screen here and make sense of them. Let me introduce Mike Suluma. Thank you very much indeed for your time. He's our political analyst for today. Mike, thank you very much indeed. Let me just refresh the screen so we get an accurate account of the numbers. And this is what we're looking at, folks, is the national results that are coming through. And so far, let me just get this up here. So far, we're seeing 7,295 of the voting districts completed. That's about 31% of the voting districts completed. And already the ANC sitting at 55, DA at 25.78, and the EF at 8.59%. So this is the national picture so far, the top three parties as we seeing it. Mike, you know, coming into this elections, a lot of people were saying, well, this is how they saw it happening. You agree?
I agree to a large extent, but I think that the surprise in these results would be the Freedom Front Plus, where they are sitting, you know, so far. You know, obviously we're still counting, but I'm very surprised by their showing up to this stage,
right?
Because it's they really are not a national appeal party. They are a specific kind of special interest, you know, looking at African-speaking people, looking at farmers, etc., who are a very small proportion of the total population.
If you look at the ANC, in 2014, they were sitting at around 62%. Remember, folks, this is only after the 31.82% of the voting districts completed. Now we're seeing it at 55%. In terms of Cyril Ramaphosa as the factor and as the leader of the ANC, what would a 60% majority win mean for him within his own party?
I think that it's what it means for him in the party and what it means for him outside the party. You know, for example, a lot of people in the financial and investment sector have been talking about, you know, how saying that the result of the ANC's performance will determine how the investor community views Cyril Ramaphosa, whether he will come out with a stronger hand to be able to push through with the economic reforms that he's been talking about. People have cut him the slack up to now to say, look, he hasn't yet gotten a mandate because he's just finishing off Jacob Zuma's term. He hasn't got his own mandate that he can stand on to push through those reforms. So the magical figure that has been bandied about has been plus 60% in the investment community. Within the ANC, I think that a lot of people, the reality is that the ANC's support has been declining over the years. You know, from 1999, you will see, because in 1994 it wasn't too bad. It wasn't overwhelming. You know, but in 1999 it was at its highest. And then from then on it has been on the decline. And I don't think that it's something that can be attributed solely to Cyril Ramaphosa. You know, to say he comes in, you know, 12 months after, or a year and a half after being made president of the ANC, he should suddenly, you know, the ANC's performance should suddenly, should the lights out. So I think that in the ANC it is more complicated. It is not just about that magical figure. In fact, inside the ANC there is no such figure. You know, it's in the investment community that has been talking about above 60%. You know, but in the ANC there is no such figure, because there are many different factors that will determine what happens with Cyril Ramaphosa, including, most importantly, what he does with his crusade to fight corruption. Because as the harder he pushes to fight corruption, the more the corrupt people in the ANC become uneasy, and the more they get the incentive to try to get rid of him.
Mike, stand by. We're going to continue our conversation with regards to the other political parties, as well as we will go through the various provinces and see how things are developing there. I want to take you now to the Free State. 24 people who were arrested following the torching of a community hall and a clinic in Viljoenskroon in the Free State are expected to appear in court today. The hall was one of the IEC's voting stations on Tuesday morning, a day before elections. Angry residents barricaded roads and torched the two buildings. They demanded they demand stands in terms of housing and other issues, and they're also accusing the local municipality of nepotism in hiring people. Let's get more on the story now. Reporter Tabiso Khadebe is covering the story very closely for us. Tabiso, thank you very much indeed for your time. What's the latest there?
Good morning to you, Blaine. I'm standing right here in front of the magistrate court, and in Viljoenskroon. This is where 24 people, as you've mentioned earlier on, this is where 24 people are expected to appear on charges of malicious damage to property. As you've mentioned also, community was complaining or protesting against the municipality nepotism. They were complaining about not being given stands by the municipality, and they started going on rampage, barricading roads and burning the two buildings. They are here in court today. They are going to appear. There were negotiations earlier on regarding their bail to be released. And talking about bail, Blaine, I'm just going to let my camera person to show you some of the family members who are here to support their members who were arrested on Tuesday during the protest. They are some of the people who were negotiating for their family members to be released so that they can continue with their lives. But the issues in this community are still continuing. They are saying that the arrest of the 24 won't prevent them from fighting for their rights. So these are the family members who came to support, at least even though it's still tense, but it's calm because there's a lot of policemen here around who are monitoring the situation. I managed to get hold of the community leader who's actually here to also to support some people who were arrested. Ntate, just please tell us, why are you here?
I'm here to support the 24 people who were arrested on Monday for a peaceful protest which took place in Ramolotsi. We just want to check if the judiciary of South Africa is fair in terms of restricting people from fighting for their rights. The protest was very simple. We requested that for more than a decade, Viljoenskroon, we've been drinking dirty water. For more than 2 decades, we've been having councillors who are corrupt, and we've requested simple that they must resign and leave the office. There are stands that have been taken out by the municipality through certain people, through SMSs, people being called in their homes that they have stands, but they have not yet requested that they must come and get stands. And another issue that we was on top of everything is unemployment. Unemployment in Viljoenskroon is humbling. It's huge, but Viljoenskroon has got 3 mines. All these 3 mines, they benefit Kroonstad and Orkney, but our people are not getting anything out of it. Some of the issues that we have raised is that municipality must stop interfering on the processes of companies when they want to hire their people. We need to make sure that our people get hired. We need to make sure that our people get food, because these things that we see today, the protests that we see around the country is because of poverty. Because poverty is a cause of what we are seeing today. And we've made it clear. The arrest of 24 people is not going to stop us from what we are doing. We are still going to continue to protest, peacefully so. Police must shoot because the police are being used for political reasons. Last week, the chief whip of Mokaga called the office in Velcom to tell them that they must go and shoot people in Viljoenskroon because we requested that they must close offices. There must not be operations. Yes, on Monday, we saw an instruction from one of the racist policemen called Kruger, instructing a policeman from Velcom that they must start shooting protesters. Protesters did not do anything on Monday. They were told that they must be shot. And the retaliation started there. When the police started to shoot our people, then people started to throw back the stones. People were taken out of their homes and they were arrested. Some of the people who were arrested here that I'm going to pick, one girl was taking her younger sister to crèche. When she was from crèche, she was taken off. We tried to negotiate on that one. They refused to listen to us. That girl is here. But worst part is a student. That day she decided not to go to school.
Yeah, you also talk about people who are living in fear of being arrested by police. They are in hiding as I'm speaking with you now. Can you please explain that?
There's a list that was submitted by members of the ANC to the police that they are behind the protest. They are behind the burning. I'm going to say this in categorically. That the burning that took place on Monday, none of us who led the community know anything about it, because on Monday when we started to be shot, we got an intel that the chief whip had instructed people from Velcom, they must go and fetch me and other leaders, they must arrest us until the elections are done. We had to flee Viljoenskroon. I came back yesterday so that I can come and support our people. We are being told when you got here that we are going to be arrested for what we do not know. The Constitutional Court last year declared that a peaceful protest, you can apply or not apply, it's fine, as long as we are fighting for the rights. And we are fighting for the rights of Viljoenskroon. I'm a resident by birth in Viljoenskroon. I'm based in Johannesburg. But what I see happening to my brothers and sisters in Viljoenskroon, it's humbling me every day. So we are requesting that police, please, I'm doing this thing, even the minister must be aware. Police in Viljoenskroon, they are being used for political, to settle political scores.
And now talking about peaceful protests that you are engaged in, but now there are two buildings, public buildings that were banned. We're talking the clinic here, we're talking the community hall, and you're now talking about the peaceful protest. Who banned the public buildings?
There's an investigation that is going through. If I was a good investigator, I would have found out by now. But as a community leader of that particular protest that is demanding service deliveries and everything, I know nothing about it. I've never even instructed one person. One of all the videos that are circulating in Viljoenskroon, there's no way where I said people must go and ban. We knew that there are people who are going to take chances. When the investigation continues, you might find that because the ANC members here in Viljoenskroon, certain group of ANC members said they will show us that we're young boys. They might be the one that are behind that thing. But now everything is being categorized to us.
So the way forward, let's talk about the people who are arrested now. You've been negotiating their bail. What's happening now with their bail?
We've just been briefed that the state wants to separate them group by group. And of which I don't know because the case is one. They are charged for protesting for what we do not know. Yesterday we found out that the police were struggling to find a charge. So it shows that there's some that they're picking something from anywhere. So we have instructed our lawyer to negotiate for them that they must get a bail so that they go back to their community. Some of them are mothers. Their kids are not going to class, they are not going to school because their mothers are not there. Yet we'll find out when they are going out. But we have requested humbly that they must be put as one, and they must be charged as one if there's a charge, and they must be released, because their fight for elections. We have been encouraging people to go and vote. People voted. We don't care about the elections.
Okay. Yes, Blaine, one of the community members here outside the magistrate court saying that they are here to support their members who were arrested, and they will continue to protest, especially for their rights to get those jobs, for the infrastructure to be built again in their community, because the infrastructure is in a bad state. So they are saying that they will continue protesting peacefully, so that to get what is what belongs to them. Blaine?
Hi, David. Thank you very much indeed for your reporting live for us from the Free State. Political analyst Mike Siluma is still with us here. Mike, let's just look at the province where Thabiso is coming from with regards to the provincial results thus far. And so far in the Free State, 481 voting districts have been completed so far, and that's an average of about 31.46%. And when we look at it, the ANC is leading there with 61.78%, the DA 18.27%, the EFF 11%, the Freedom Front Plus at 4.25%, and then the ATM, which is very interesting, a new party that came up in October 2018, and they have about 1,286 votes, which is 0.64%. How do you see this shaping up?
I think that maybe we should start with the ANC, the critical thing. If I were running a political party in the Free State and I'm in the ANC, I'd be very, very worried because if you look at the trend, they have been on a downward trend. From, if you look at 2004, they commanded 81%, they come down 71% in 2009, and then to 2014, they are at 70%. But now, so far, obviously we've got to qualify, to say that we're still counting. They're sitting at 61. They're like in the lower 60s. And I would not be happy with that kind of trend for my political party in the medium long count him. The second thing that I would be worried about if I were in the ANC in the Free State would be the entry of the EFF.
Right.
Because you see that where there's a dramatic drop, say from 2009, 2014, the EFF comes in, they immediately take 8% of it, and you see the ANC coming down from 71 to 69%. So the EFF has had an almost direct impact, I would say, on ANC support in the Free State, because it's essentially. Remember, the EFF comes out of the ANC. So essentially, it is the same people, the same ideological background, same history of people who are migrating, from the ANC, I would say, to the EFF. The happiest party would be the Democratic Alliance, because if you look at 2004, they're 8.4%, and then they're now at 16, growth, and likely now indications are that they're in the heading towards the 20% mark.
Folks, I just want to remind you that this is about 31% of the voting districts completed. So this is where we are standing at the moment. I want to zoom in onto the ATM. It's very interesting. As I said, it's a party that came up in October last year, but it's doing well here. Also, if you look at a province like the Eastern Cape, you see the ATM there with 10,759 votes. If I cast my mind back to March, I think they won a by-election in the Eastern Cape in March, and they had about 30%. So maybe you could start seeing the trends from local to a national level. Can you see it?
I think that from an ideological point of view, Blaine, if we looked at, there are two ways of looking at ATM as well as ACM. You could either look at them as independent, new parties, new kids on the block who are charting a completely different ideological path into the future. Or you could look at them as Jacob Zuma supporting formations, essentially, that are basically set up by people who are coming out of the ANC.
Well,
so it's not as if there's a new ideological consideration or position that has come out of that. My take would be that it would be the latter. I would say that they really are, if you look at ATM, Free State, it's the same crowd of people, the people who tend to support Ace Magashule and them, they would gravitate towards the ATM. They would also gravitate towards the ACM. I'm not seeing it here. I wonder where they are in the Free State, where Hlaudi Motsoeneng comes from. In the Eastern Cape, it's the same thing, Jimmy Mani. They were organizing using essentially the non-mainstream or the independent religious formation, Christian formations, to garner support. But I would not read too much into this. I think that it's probably driven to a large extent by what we often call the coalition of the wounded of the ANC.
Okay, I want to talk about coalitions generally, but stand by, Mike. I want to go now to KwaZulu-Natal. It's where my colleague Aina Mhlongo is standing by at the Provincial ROC, the Results Operations Center in Durban. Aina, what's the numbers looking at on your side?
Yeah, very good morning to you, Blaine, and morning to our viewers once again. I can tell you, Blaine, that it's quite an anxious time for political parties here in KwaZulu-Natal. And the numbers coming in a bit slower than they are expecting. We can see some of them have been pacing up and down, hoping that those numbers would be coming in a little bit faster. But of course, Blaine, that is largely due to the challenges that were experienced on voting day here in KwaZulu-Natal. As you know, we've been reporting quite extensively on the demonstrations that took place yesterday, and many of the stations opening later than they should, and in other areas we saw voters boycotting yesterday's election. But let's get to it. Obviously today it is about the political parties. They've had long and hard campaigns, and now they're awaiting the results. Let me bring in now the Democratic Alliance, and we have the leader of the Democratic Alliance in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, Zwakele Mncwango. Mr. Mncwango, thank you very much for your time. We didn't get an opportunity to chat with you yesterday, but just to get, how did you see the election? There were certain challenges that took place. Just very briefly, take us through what you felt yesterday, any issues that you picked up.
Yeah, morning to you, and morning to the viewers at home. One must say, yes, there were challenges. we are disappointed with the IEC this time around, and I think one have expected better. 25 years of democracy, after running so many elections, they should have improved the system. There's so many discrepancies that we've seen in different parts of KZN, but we've laid complaints with the IEC. We are hoping that IEC will investigate those complaints and really give us feedback. I know there's a meeting now with PLC members. Then I'm hoping from there we'll know exactly what IEC plan to do with those complaints. But overall, I think now is a moment of truth. People have spoken. We have to keep seeing the screen. Obviously, it's coming very slowly, but for us, the DA, I think we are a bit excited. Reason being, we see some growth, especially in rural areas where we never had footprint before, and we see that steady growth, which is very interesting for us. And I have no doubt that as the day goes by, things will change for more better. But at the moment, we are happy with what we see. But as I said, we have to wait for IEC to tell us exactly what they plan to do with those complaints.
Just speaking about the results, and we must say the last time you and I were checking, only 13 of the VDs had been counted. So we're still very much a long way to go in terms of those results. But at the moment, the IFP, it seems just ahead. You've wanting to ensure that you wanted to maintain at least your being the main opposition here in the province. Do you think that you will still be able to retain that position?
No, we're not shaken at all. As I said, these results are actually coming from traditionally IFP strongholds and some ANC strongholds. But what is very interesting is, before, if you compare, the DA is growing to most of the VDs that already counted already. So it tells you that if you haven't counted some of the areas like Umsunduz, you haven't seen anything from Umsunduz, nothing from eThekwini, there's a long way to go. We have no doubt that we'll definitely come higher than the IFP end of the count. But we are positive with the results and we are excited. But as I said, part of the challenge is we can't really now complain about IEC, yes. But we are hoping IEC will resolve those issues. But at the moment, as a DA, we see some growth. In Umhlathuze, for example, we are currently leading even above the ANC. But obviously, it's because some VDs which are counted might have really shown support from the DA. But as time goes by, also going to change. But we are excited from what we see in terms of ZN perspective. But we'll see as time goes by.
Zwagala, another thing that you raised with us yesterday, between you and I when we were talking, you were quite unhappy about the numbers of people that actually come out to the voting stations, and also I suppose adding to that, these demonstrations may have also put off people who had intended to go and cast their votes.
Look, turnout is concerning, but more concerning is voter education. When you've got people on a voting day decide to protest and burn tires, block roads, it's a problem because they deny other people's rights to go and cast their vote. We'll expect that people know better that in democracy you protest by using your ballot box, you go there and vote out current government, you help with services from that government. So it's unfortunate, which is a challenge also to us as political parties, to IEC, to say before election or in between elections, what do we do to educate our nation, to ensure that everyone understands the power of their vote? Because the fact that people can protest on a voting day against current government but not going to go and vote, decide to block roads, it's a challenge. It shows lack of understanding on how democracy works, because when people understand democracy, they know very well that they have to mobilize other people to go and cast their vote against current government instead of mobilizing people to block roads and end up avoiding other people to come and vote. I think it's unfortunate we see what we see today, but I'm hoping that IEC can really observe and take challenge. Also, as political leaders, also we must take this further, take responsibility to ensure that we educate our people how really democracy works.
All right, so Zwagala, thank you very much for your time. We're going to leave it here for now. I know we'll be catching up with you as the day goes on. We have said that results were still way away, and more results are expected to come in, and we're looking forward to the eThekwini Metro, which is likely going to bring a sizable amount of these votes. Let me now ask the IFP. Joining me now is the treasurer of the IFP, Mr. Naren Singh. Mr. Singh, thank you very much for joining us. Just to follow up on Mr. Mngongo's last point with regards to yesterday, the demonstration demonstrations. A lot of the political parties that we're speaking to quite upset, have this feeling that the demonstrations yesterday ended up preventing people who had wanted to go and cast their votes that opportunity, denying them that democratic right, and thus the figures that we have now, the turnout not looking so good in KwaZulu-Natal.
No, thank you, Ayanda, for having us. No, we are also very disturbed about these disturbances that took place because, as you quite rightly say, it prevented people who wanted to exercise their right to make their mark not to be able to go to the voting stations. And we had made some appeals to some of these demonstrators that if they wanted to protest against the current councillor that they have, then the way to do it was to go to the ballot box and vote for some other party. And that would have been a sure way of them indicating that we are fed up with the kind of rule or the kind of councillor that we have in our respective ward. So it's very, very unfortunate that happened. I think some of it could have been prevented if intelligence was good enough. I don't know to what extent SAPS intelligence were on top of these issues before they happened.
Let's move on to the results now, but of course, as we had said, we're still trickling in very slowly here in KwaZulu-Natal in terms of our votes coming through. The last we checked, we're probably now around 14 or so of the VDs that have been counted and declared. You're looking good so far. Looking at the numbers, you're at second, but as I said, things can change. Your comments so far, you ran a very strong campaign at this time. You're very sure that if you do not want to take, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal, you had your eyes set on improving here in this province.
No, we're certainly going to improve. The numbers are looking good, but as you say, there's a long way to go, and it's never over till the fat lady sings. But we'll wait and see. We'll live in hope, and we're hoping to improve. The metros are still to come in, and that could change things a bit. But then, of course, on the other hand, the outlying areas are also yet to come in. And from all indications we have, there were huge turnout in areas like Mkanyaguda, King Ketchwayo, and other areas up north. So we'll just wait and see, and I'm sure you'll call me back again to see how we're doing.
Your campaign was, of course, focused on regaining your support that had been lost since 2011. You focused very much in the more your strongholds, previous strongholds, rural parts of KwaZulu-Natal. You had your party agents in the various voting stations. I'm sure they've been able to feed you some information. How have you fared?
We have been receiving results, and like I say, some of the results that we are getting at our own offices look good, but they're only as good as when they are officially counted by the IEC. And, you know, one of the things that we were a bit concerned about was the Section 24 voting. I think the IEC, you know, over all these years, they could have found a better way of ensuring that there were checks and balances to prevent people from moving to one station to another. But however, we're keeping our eye on it because we will see what the audits show. And if there are alarming figures at some stations of a number of Section 24 votes, and obviously we will query that with the IEC.
I just want to let you, before I let you go, Mr. Singh, we heard that Nkosimangosutu Buthelezi had previously said that he would possibly be stepping down after this election. Now hearing that he is going to be returning back to Parliament?
He's never said that he would not return to Parliament. He said that he would step down as leader of the party, and I think there's a difference. There's a huge difference in that. Once we have our conference, he would not stand for re-election as president of the party. But being the #1 on the National Assembly list, it's incumbent of him to take up his seat and then decide after that what he wants to do. But we've left that decision to him.
So he's still yet to, is it confirmed, depending on your numbers, he will return to Parliament?
He will definitely return because as we look at the national numbers, there are enough seats, votes that we have gained for him to be in. He's #1 on our list, and so he's in.
All right, Mr. Singh. As you said, we'll catch up with you later as more of the results come in. So thank you very much for your time. We're going to leave it there, Blaine, and back to you in studio.
And Mplongo, thank you very much indeed for your reporting, coming to us live from the KZN Rock, the Results Operations Centre. Let me bring in Mike Sunuma, still with us, trying to make sense of these numbers. You heard from the DA. You also heard about, you know, from the IFP, Naren Singh saying it's not over till a certain type of lady sings. Yeah. And I guess the DA will be singing the same tune in terms of the confidence they have in terms of, you know, the things can change and they can improve and get the numbers. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I think that of all these parties, the DA is the one that's sitting pretty in KZN. I mean, if you look at their numbers, if you go back to 2004, it was a very difficult year for them. And then 2009, they go up to 9%. 2014,
Mike,
they go to 12.
Sorry, man, I just have to stand by. We're going to go now to a developing story. Mangoba Mkunu is covering, I understand, Gwede Mantashe, who is addressing the media. Let's listen.
Cooperation between itself and opposition parties.
We have always wanted to cooperate with the opposition. It is always opposition that always walked away.
Yes.
We'll continue wanting to work with them. If they walk away, we won't grab them. Yes.
Dr. Mantashe, we've had some of your colleagues basically saying they're not available for the next cabinet. Are you available?
I don't know. We don't apply for positions in the cabinet.
Personally?
No, wait. We don't apply for position in the cabinet. The President of the Republic appoints the cabinet.
Okay, colleagues, may I ask that we stop it here?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. How are you?
Okay, the ANC's Gwede Mantashe there, a brief briefing, so to speak. We are going to continue to speak to various other political parties and get their reaction with regards to the results coming in. They will no doubt be keeping a close eye on that large board there. 48 political parties contesting the national elections and about 78 political parties contesting at a provincial and national level. So lots at stake for not only the voter but political parties as well. Mike Siluma is still with us. We were talking about the KZN results that are coming through, and you were saying that, look, the IFP is doing pretty well with 19.97% of the vote and the DA at 12.15%. Folks, just bear in mind that just 14.74% of the voting districts completed. Your impressions?
Yep. So no, I was saying that if you look at the DA, they would be, as things stand now, they're the happiest of the political parties, because things have been getting better and better and stabilizing for them in KZN. If you go back to 2004, they were on 8%. If you go to 2009, 9%. 2014, 12%, and now they're still in the just above 10. They are sitting at 12. So they'd be happy with the showing. If you look at the IFP blame. I think there's the dance there, the political dance here going on between the ANC and the IFP. Because at a time where the IFP starts to suffer, the ANC gains, and vice versa. So if you look at let's start with the IFP. If you look at IFP, 2004, they were at 36%. That was the high point of their support in KZN. This was just after, in fact, if you go back to 99, they were at 41%. That's when the IFP was still controlling the old KwaZulu. They were just coming back into the broader South African political thing, but the IFP was the government of KwaZulu, essentially. And they were at 41%. And then after in the new dispensation, 2004, they go down to 36. 2009, they go down to 22%. And then in 2014, they are at 10. Now, look at the ANC. It's a very interesting correlation. Because if you look at the ANC, at the time that the IFP starts going down, the ANC goes up. In 2004, the ANC was at 46% in KZN. As the IFP goes down to 22%, the ANC goes up to 62%, right? And where the IFP goes down to 10%, the ANC goes up to 64%.
Right.
Now, what that says is that there is an overlap of membership. And you see the Jacob Zuma factor.
This is the
point where the ANC starts picking up. It's when Jacob Zuma becomes president of the ANC. Those years, 2009, 2014. The ANC shoots up from 46% to 62 to 64, right? And IFP goes in the opposite direction.
Right.
Now, what you are seeing now, if you go fast forward to today, again, we have to qualify that as at now.
Yes.
The IFP is now, sitting at 19%. The ANC clearly is going, into some kind of decline. And what has happened? Because one of the factors is that Jacob Zuma is no longer president of the ANC. Because what happened was that with Jacob Zuma's ascendancy as president of the ANC, there were a lot of people who actually crossed from the IFP to the ANC. Because the one thing we tend to deny, or ignore in KZN politics, and in fact in South African politics generally, is the factor of cultural or tribal identity. Right. So what tends to happen is that there would have been a lot of people who would have, or traditionally have been IFP supporters, who would have crossed over to the ANC following Jacob Zuma because of his Zulu cultural symbolism. He was playing very closely to the king. He would go there, sit there, you know, when they've got cultural festivals, etc. So he was embracing Zulu cultural ethnic symbolism and attracting a lot of people who are traditionalists into the ANC. With his departure, I suspect that some of those people will gravitate back to the IFP.
I hear you, Mike, but what about the NFP and how do they factor into this whole thing? We know that the NFP back in 2014 had about 7.31% of the vote. In 2016 for the local government elections, they were disqualified because of some fees issues. They didn't meet the deadline. How the current state of affairs with regards to the NFP, they currently now, with 14% of the voting districts declared, they are currently sitting at about 1.43% with about 4,785 votes. How do you think the state of affairs in the NFP is playing out provincially?
I think that you know the story about the formation of the NFP, you know, and I think that it is instructive that once the NFP was formed, it became very close to the ANC. You know, there's a view that the NFP was in fact a project of the ANC with or without with Jacob Zuma and the ANC. You know, basically to split the IFP support. You know, and I think subsequent events actually seemed to bear that out. But the other blow that they suffered was that their leader, who was quite popular in the NFP, even in the IFP. That's why she was able to take a huge chunk of support from the IFP into the NFP. That his falling ill actually had a very devastating effect on the NFP. And I can't see them coming back from that, given what we've just said about the movement of Zulu supporters, or rather of political supporters in KZN who identify with Zulu symbolism. That I can't see them leaving either of the IFP or the ANC to go to the NFP, which essentially is virtually leaderless.
Mike, stand by. We're going to continue this conversation. It's an interesting province. The dynamics of this province is very interesting. It is always in the national spotlight because it's fiercely contested down in KwaZulu-Natal. Let's crisscross the country now and get an update with regards to what's happening. For instance, let's go to the Eastern Cape. It's where we find a reporter, Zimkita Makungwane, who's live for us there. Zimkita, thank you very much indeed for your time. What's the latest?
Well, Blaine, here we are seeing those who are on the leading front when we are talking about the 45% of those results that have already been declared, which is the ANC. They are gathering together here at Nelson Mandela Drive, somewhat trying to celebrate, even though they know that things might change as we are getting those results. However, we are seeing them grouping together. The streets of Mthatha are still very colorful with a number of placards and posters that were put by different political parties that were campaigning here in this Eastern Cape, wanting to have a fair share of the votes that will be brought by the people of the Eastern Cape who voted yesterday. As you can see there, on the 30th of March, the EFF leader, Julius Malema, was here at Walter Sisulu University Stadium. He was talking to young people where he promised them many things, including free education. But as we are seeing the results coming in now, we are seeing that the ANC is standing at 68.41% and the DA following the ANC at 18.03%. With the EFF, that's putting their hopes on the young electorate around about 6.81%. And another interesting factor here, Blaine, is that the UDM, which was one of the parties that were seen to be the second party that's leading after the ANC for a number of years, things are changing now because according to the 45% of results that have already been declared, we are seeing the UDM standing on the 4th position position with only 1.85% of the votes. And where we are here in Tata, it used to be the stronghold of the UDM, but with the introduction of other parties like the ATM, we are seeing some of those votes moving from parties like the UDM to the new kids on the block, which is the ATM. They are also showing on the scoreboard of the Eastern Cape with 1.30% of the votes, which means that the new kids on the block, which is the ATM, are on 5th position here in the Eastern Cape with the 45% of those voting districts being declared. Another thing that I think has really crippled the power of the UDM is another party that was recently formed, ACA, which was formed by the then Secretary General of the UDM, Wandile Tsipa, who was only contesting in these elections provincially. However, despite him only choosing to contest in this province, we don't see him in the top 6 of those parties that are leading in this province. Well, Blaine, it's still early days to say people have any reason to celebrate, because as I'm saying to you, it's only 45% of those votes that are being declared. Another issue that we need to talk about here in the Eastern Cape is the low voter turnout. A lot of people did not really go to the polls yesterday compared to previous years. In 2014, it was 68.3% of people who took to the polls to go and make their mark and take the decision to who they want them to lead. But 10%, we see a 10% decrease. That's all we have for time for now. It's back to you in Pretoria.
Zimkita, thank you very much indeed. The voting turnout seemingly is in sharp focus also in KwaZulu-Natal. People are talking about the voter turnout. We're going to get some analysis very soon. Zimkita Makungwana live for us in the Eastern Cape. Thank you very much. Let's go now to the National Results Operations Centre, where we find our reporter Mangoba Mtunu, who's live there with, I understand, Pule Mabe.
As you know, the numbers trickling in slowly, and of course political parties also starting to arrive here in anticipation of those results. I can certainly tell you it's a hive of activity here at the Results Operations Centre. But of course the scoreboards showing at the moment that over 4.6 million voters have been counted so far, and obviously the ANC in the lead with over 2.5 million of those votes, followed by the DA and the EFF subsequently. But of course just to get a bit of a reaction from the ANC itself, I'm now joined by the ANC's national spokesperson, Pule Mabe. Pule, thanks for joining us. Of course, any surprises there from you as the ANC with regards to the vote so far?
Well, we are quite encouraged with what we are seeing on the scoreboard, but of course these are early days. We wouldn't want to trump up any victory talk for now. You would know that we have got comrades of the ANC who are here throughout. The chair of the communication subcommittee, Comrade Nat Kakana, is here. The deputy secretary general is here. The national chair is here. Our acting spokesperson, who has been carrying out with yourselves during this campaign, Comrade Dakota Lekhwete, is also here. Our own comrades who are deployed in the political lies and party lies and committee are also here to try and monitor if there are issues that require to be attended to and all of that. So we have got a strong contingent of the ANC cadreship that is here. We are monitoring the outcomes quite closely. Of course, these are early days, and the ANC will be monitoring the progress as it unfolds during the day.
Okay. Obviously, some certain polls predicting that the ANC could lose some of its support, especially in Gauteng. Are you worried about this?
Well, like I said, Mangoba, these are early days. We are here with yourselves. As and when we see development, I mean, we are looking at the scoreboard with you. As and when there are developments, we'll be looking at those and talking to them and being able to react. So far, so good. It looks like the people of all the different provinces are affirming the ANC to continue to be their own government. Of course, we can't say much as yet because we'll be here looking at the scoreboard.
Okay. Let's look at Gauteng quickly. Of course, that's one of the hotly contested provinces. We know that as it stands, as of 11:05, over 21% of the provincial votes had been counted. And of course, the ANC in the lead with over 50.66%, followed by the DA 27%. Are you at all confident that you are going to win Gauteng again?
Well, we contest elections with a view of winning. There is no political party that goes to elections to lose. There's no way. The ANC has entered these elections hopeful that it will score victory. We have presented a fair and open manifesto that our President Cyril Ramaphosa, has been the advocate of, where we said to our people who want to grow this country, working together with them. And that message has resonated very well with many of them, including our own program on unity and renewal. Actually, what has come alive has been the unity of our own cadreship. They've all been working, led by our own officials, who have been crisscrossing almost all the 9 provinces of the Republic. Again, members of the National Executive Committee have also been on the ground. So our own PECs and RECs throughout the country, and we've been encouraged by the kind of mood that has been prevailing throughout all of these provinces. It showed that our cadres are ready to reclaim governance again.
The issue of coalitions, of course, the Gauteng province, having said that they're not willing to talk issues of coalition, they are saying that they'll rather go into the opposition benches. Is this the same view that you hold as national?
Well, the national chair has already expressed our view with regard to that. Where we are now, we are busy, we are receiving results. We can't be talking about coalition now when results are still trickling in. We can't do that. We went into these elections to win. So once elections are concluded, and having looked at the results, the leadership collective will be able to determine what kind of steps should be taken.
Okay. Thank you, Pule, for joining us. Of course, that is the ANC's national spokesperson, Pule Maba, speaking to us here at the Results Center. Of course, the numbers still trickling in, but it's still early days, as we say, because only a fraction of the vote has been counted so far. We're still expecting more results to come through here, but of course, indications are that at this point, the ANC is in the clear lead at this time.
It's still early days. I'm sure that's going to be the common refrain for the better part of the morning. Mangoba Mkuno live for us at the capital, the National Results Operations Center. Thank you very much indeed, my friend. We'll try to catch up with you a little later on. We're also going to speak to various other political parties with regards to the results that are coming through. I understand Mangoba has somebody else with him. Back to you, Mangoba.
Yes, indeed, Blaine. We do have a member of the African Christian Democratic Party, Mr. Brendan Govender, of course, speaking to us there. I mean, Mr. Govender, what's your take on your results so far, looking at the National Board and the score so far?
Well, if I look at the National Board and I'm looking at the trends, the National Board is just giving me a reflection of what the rural vote is. The municipalities and the metros have not come in as yet. So I'm impressed of what's coming in from the rural areas. If I had to compare it to 2014, there's a great increase. Yeah.
So are you confident of a seat in Parliament, or that you're going to gain some seats in the National Assembly?
Well, if I look at the percentage now, and if the election will stop with that result, it will give me 4 seats. And with the previous term, we had 3 seats. So that's already an increase. Yeah.
So do you think you did well in your campaign this time around in trying to grow your electorate?
I would say this was our best campaign, especially on social media. We've had the best campaign this run.
Are you worried at all about these new other small political parties that have emerged that are seemingly competing for the vote with you?
Not at all. The ACDP has been around for 26 years. We have a track record in Parliament for the past 25 years. The new kids on the block don't have a track record. So I'm not really worried.
Okay, thank you very much. That was Mr. Brendan Govender from the ACDP speaking to us, giving us his reaction here on the scores that they've gained so far here at the Results Operations Center. Of course, we will bring you more updates with regards to the numbers as they are being verified and as they trickle in here.
Live for us in the capital. Thank you very much indeed for your reporting. We'll try to catch up with you shortly. Let's continue this conversation and get some understanding about what these results actually mean. Mike Zaluma is still with us, political analyst. Mike, you're listening to the ACDP. They've been around for a number of years now. So far, if you look at the national picture here, we see the ACDP with 34% of the voting districts completed. The ACDP sitting at about 1%. That's 49,733. What do you make of their campaign of the years?
You know, the problem for the ACDP, Blaine, is that if in theory, you know, because South Africa is a predominantly Christian country, you might think in theory that if you stand up on a platform of pushing Christian values, etc., that you'd actually do well politically, you know. But it doesn't always translate like that. What it does in fact do is that it narrows your area of focus, and it excludes a whole lot of people who are who are secularist Christians, for example, which is the majority of South Africans. But also it means that you don't have much else to offer to people beyond your Christian values that you're promoting, whether you call it honesty, being against corruption, etc. So I think that South Africa is such a diverse society that any party that decides to hone in on one aspect or talks to one particular constituency out of the many different constituencies is never really going to gain traction as a national political party, because it's a special interest party that fails to speak to, what it does mean is that it fails to speak to the majority of South Africans.
Mike, we have journalists, SABC journalists fanned out across the country, and we see and we experience things a lot. And, sometimes, the old tenet for journalism is that don't be the story, write about the story. But sometimes in the course of duty, humanity trumps everything. Journalists are cautioned to remain outside the story as observers and recorders of history, reporting without bias or favor. But our SABC reporter, Makeketlo Motlabe, is a special one. He encountered a sobbing pensioner who had lost his ID. Motlabe came to his rescue. He called an online taxi service to help drive the pensioner to a Home Affairs office. Watch.
Alexandra, a teeming township north of Johannesburg. It's 8 p.m., just an hour to polling stations drawing their curtains. This is 52-year-old Michael Dlamini. I assisted him onto a taxi to the nearest Home Affairs. Dlamini has voted since 1994, but now he's anxious. Today, the streak could be cut cruelly short. He has just been turned away after losing his ID. It's a helpless situation. He simply wants to vote, but time is fleeing. It's 8:20 p.m. For him, the sands are pouring from the hourglass. We arrive at Home Affairs. His ID is processed within 15 minutes. But time and tide wait for no man. It's 8:45 p.m. As we speed back to the township, we come across a voting station along the road. At this point, it's any port in a storm. After all, it's nearly 9 p.m. But Dlamini is redirected to the correct entrance. This is the last chance for him. All he wants is better service delivery in Alex, and his vote will be his voice. And finally, his vote is cast.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much, my brother. Without you, I couldn't have done anything. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Even the Uber driver may have lost clients while waiting for us, but the spirit of Ubuntu prevails.
I think he deserves to win it, to get his vote and to vote for his rights. I mean, for the future of his kids and his grandchildren.
And all is well that ends well.
I'm so happy, I can't even speak. You know, the way I'm so happy. And the way you know what, you helped me. They couldn't help me there. So I thought maybe probably that was the end of me. And then, but then you took up to it up to you to go to all way, to try and help me. Yes, and then you did help me. So I'm very happy. I'm very happy. I made my mark today.
Makeketlo Motlabe reporting on a startling and amazing journey. SABC News, Alexandra.
Good on you, Mark Ketla. Thank you very much indeed for helping. I guess you got to help out where you can. Mike, I mean, you saw the story. You can see the desperation and the yearning to go out and cast their vote for many South Africans around the country. But, you know, when we're speaking to Zimkita, when we're speaking to Ayanda in KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape respectively, turnout was an issue, isn't it? When we see in the Eastern Cape it's sitting around 59%, in KwaZulu-Natal it was sitting around 64%. What do you think? Political parties not energizing their base as well as the undecided or new voter enough?
I think, Blaine, that some of the factors, you know, would be the logistical factors, practical factors. In many of the areas, you know, as we know, the weather was not playing along. You know, it meant that it was cold, it was raining, you know, with all the attendance complications that come with that. And I think that did play, you know, obviously a big role. But I think that maybe we need to pause and ask, because the South African voter turnout is one of the highest in the world. So we need to, you know, but we are a young nation at the same time. So I think we should pause and ask, you know, to say, are we not actually starting to mature now? And also that, for example, if you look at the euphoria of the early years, people actually literally believed that Mandela's coming out, he's going to do a whole lot of fantastic things for us, you know, a land of milk and honey was around the corner. But I think that the collective voter, if you like, has increasingly become cynical of politics, or cynical and or more realistic about what can be delivered and what cannot be delivered. So when politicians go around doing their door-to-doors, etc., promising heaven and earth, etc., I think increasingly people are becoming more and more skeptical.
Yeah. You know, what about the youth involvement in these elections? I recall yesterday when I was standing in line to vote, I observed a lot of youth in that line, despite the bad weather, the inclement weather in Johannesburg. But what struck me, you know, Mike, was seeing individual youth. Not, you know, they didn't come in a group, they didn't make a day out of it. It was individuals just standing there and wanting to cast their vote, which tells me that that person, that youngster, took a conscious decision to say, you know what, let me go out there and vote.
I think that the whole question of the youth voter turnout is a very interesting one, and to my mind, what you are seeing is a reflection of the absence or failure of the mainstream political parties in South Africa to speak to the issues of youth. You know, I mean, I think there are very few, you know, probably the EFF is the one that pushed the issue of land and jobs, right? But not as their central campaigning plank. It was one of several in a basket of things that the EFF wants. The other parties just, you know, the issue of youth unemployment was really a throwaway thing, maybe as part of a conversation about what to do with the economy, growing the economy, creating jobs, etc. But there is nobody who is actually talking to the youth about youth issues. Even the youth leaders in the political parties are talking things other than youth issues. So I'm not surprised that, you know, young people are not particularly excited, you know, about voting for many of the political parties.
There's various narratives of the elections 29. Mike, thank you very much indeed for your time. We always appreciate your insight. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, mate.
Political analyst Mike Suluma there. All right, rolling coverage of elections 2019 continues. We are keeping a very, very close eye on the results. Remember, there are 22,924 voting stations nationwide. So results will be published from the various results operation centers once they are still audited. Still early days, as we've been talking about, but let's take a look at some of these numbers as they come in through thick and fast in some areas and trickling in some. Let's go back to my colleague Desiree Chauke, who's at the National Results Operation Center. Hey, Dee.
Actually, Blaine, you're coming to me just to make my last goodbyes as the results keep trickling in. More momentum is building up on the elections results floor, and my colleague Mangoba Mkunu is standing by with somebody to talk to. Mangoba?
Well, thank you, Desiree. Of course, we still continue to get to those political reactions from political parties who are here. I'm now joined by the IFP's Mkhuleko Hlengwa, just to give a bit of analysis on the outcome so far with regards to his party. Mkhuleko, so far the IFP only getting about 85,000 of that vote, of 4.8 of those votes that have been counted. Are you worried as the IFP?
It's early days, it's early hours. The votes are coming in very, very slowly, and we are pretty confident that when they actually start moving in thick and fast, there will be an increase in what you currently see now. But of course, we welcome these results amidst great concern, which we have already raised with the IEC insofar as double voting is concerned, and the PLC meeting, which is just concluded a short while ago, has seen the IEC concede and also express its own concern about it, and we welcome the fact that sampling now will be done to establish the extent to which the prevalence of these irregularities are concerned insofar as the zip mission is concerned, removable ink, a shortage of VEC forms and so on and so forth, which call into question the fact, the integrity of these elections. And so we had raised concerns with the IEC, a complaint, and Prince Buthelezi himself, even prior to the election on Tuesday, actually had raised this issue with the IEC. So we're hoping that the investigation will yield an explanation, because so far the IEC has failed dismally in that regard.
Okay, the IFP seemingly gaining some ground in KZN, being number 2 at the moment. Are you confident that you'll again reclaim your space as the official opposition in KZN?
We are confident that we're going to grow, and we are confident that we're going to have serious changes in the structure of governance, and that's why I'm saying it's early days. Let's allow the due process of counting to go on, but for the IEC to take us into confidence about the issue.
Let me hold it there for now because of time. From the IFP, of course, I'm now joined by one of the economic freedom fighters, possible MP, Mr. Peter Kietsi. Peter, predictions so far, do you think that you're doing well?
Well, I think so far the EFF is doing extremely well, not just well. I mean, we're just above 8%, and it's almost 5 million votes that are counted. And one would just, predict that should we reach 50% and the EFF catches double digits, we're in for a very big surprise.
Okay, and then as the EFF, of course, some polls have predicted that the EFF will grow by about 10 to 14%. Looking at these results now, are you confident that you've made enough through your campaigns to reach these targets?
The EFF, with no doubt, had the most successful, campaigns than any other political formation in this country, and the fighters have given it all. I mean, ground forces everywhere else, they did everything they can to make sure that we deliver a decisive victory. We are not going to speak much about the research, institute that have been predicting elections. This is the real thing. Our people have voted, and we'll have to wait and see how it turns out.
Okay, thank you very much. Of course, that being Peter Gates, who represents the economic freedom fighters, of course, hopeful that they're going to also be very successful in this election. Of course, we'll continue to keep you up to date with regards to the numbers as they trickle in. But for now, we'll take a short break, and agenda will continue after this short break.
When South Africans go to the polls, SABC News gives you names you can trust. Sakina, Criselda, Peter, Stephen, Tsepiso, Francis, Blaine, Leanne. South Africa votes. Live coverage starts Wednesday at 6 a.m. on SABC News.
The SABC News mobile app is your one-stop digital portal to all the news you need. Stay connected with the latest in breaking news. Watch the SABC News channel along with clips and live streams of all the big news events, and listen to all the SABC News radio stations live, including podcasts and much more. Simply download the SABC News app to your Android or iOS device from either the Play Store or the App Store. SABC News, independent, impartial.
I needed to share my story such that everybody can relate to it and everybody can understand that we're all in the same boat.
Social entrepreneur Emily Oliphant has added author to the list of her accomplishments.
This new venture in her life is another platform for her to share her story of living as an able-bodied person to now conquering life without full use of her legs.
I was not born with a disability. I was injured in a car accident 15 years ago in 2003. And my car accident was a hit and run. So what happened is, it was late at night and a car came from nowhere and hit me from the back passenger side, pushed me off the road. I got hooked on one of the barrier lanes on M1, just before Glenhovie off-ramp. There used to be those orange barrier lane kind of things on the road. And I got stuck there and my car rolled back to face where it came from. The person didn't stop. Later on, when I was still in hospital, I received a handmade postcard. And this person was saying that they were claiming to be the person that stopped to call the ambulance or emergency services for me at the scene. And then I'm like, could this be the same person that, caused the accident? Or you don't know. You don't know, so I really don't know. I don't know where they are even today.
This life-altering moment opened a new chapter of her life.
When you have an injury like I have, when you have a debilitating injury or situation, it doesn't just affect you as a person. It affects everybody, your family, your friends, your colleagues, your environment. So you have to help them understand so that it's not all for them to care for you. No, you have to meet them halfway. And the nice thing about having the experience of both walking and being on the wheelchair, it helps me understand that not everybody has a clue about my injury. Not everybody understands disability. And for my role is therefore to say, yes, we are out and about, you don't see my disability, but know that before I get to your venue, 1, 2, 3, accessibility needs to be in place. I think it was at that time when I decided, you know what, anything that is negative, anything that is not gonna benefit me, to take me to improve on my well-being. I didn't come back from an unconscious, back to life, to be told that there's no hope for me living a fruitful life. You know what I mean? Because they tell you, you're not gonna walk again, you're not gonna go back to work, you're not gonna do this, and then you're listening to a whole list of, things that have been affected. And I'm like, I didn't come back for this. So anybody and anyone who would tell me any negative thing around my injury, from that day onwards, I shut them out.
Adapting to life on a wheelchair was not an easy task.
From my first job, I've always lived on my own independently, being self-reliant. Now you have to rely on medication, chronic medication, for your system to adjust to its normality. And you have to rely on physiotherapy. You have to rely on people to help you from time to time for things like simple things like hanging the curtains in the house. I can't do that myself anymore. Doing the garden. I used to love doing the garden. I'm only reduced to watering the garden and doing little things, but I need a gardener. So it's all those things I need to adjust and say, okay, now it's not about you doing. Put yourself in a position to receive help and assistance where it needs to be.
She shared key life choices that have impacted her life in a positive way.
I've always been a health fanatic, even before my injury. I've always made sure that I eat well. Not a fanatic in terms of excessively going to the gym every day and eating vegetables all the time. No. But I've always been conscious of my health and well-being. What I do at home, I have an automated bicycle that I bought after my injury. What that does is, I sit like I sit and I watch my TV. Like sometimes I prefer like late in the evening when I start watching, my TV schedule is from 6 o'clock. And then I sit here and I put my bicycle in front of me. Then the strap, so I put my feet on it and I strap it to it, and it's automated. So I switch it on and it runs and I just cycle.
When she's not working from home, Emily is on the move promoting her work and doing advocacy work through her self-titled foundation.
I have a foundation that I've established in 2012, And we've been doing a lot of work in disability integration sector space. And one of the programs since 2017 that we started to focus on, we've decided that given where the country is moving into and the change, we all talk about youth empowerment and women empowerment. So it's very critical, and it was very important that the foundation looks at how they can contribute towards the National Development Plan. And what we decided from last year, 2017, was that we will focus on youth empowerment. And when we say youth, we mean youth with disabilities. And our program has been packaged such that it focuses on the school leaving grades, like your grade 8 to 12, preparing them to